In many ways, there's a war on the First Amendment happening in this country now. One of the things we always talk about on this show, but it doesn't get much play anywhere else, is that a lot of states try to crack down on BDS support. BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions. That is a movement to try to get Palestinian rights and dignity recognized by putting economic pressure on Israel. There's different kinds of BDS. There's BDS of Israeli settlements, and there's BDS of all of Israel. But it's a nonviolent approach to try to, get Palestinian rights recognized. Now, in the case of, I believe it was in Houston when the hurricane hit there, they said in order to get hurricane money, you have to swear that you will not support BDS. Total unconstitutional move there. You can't do that. A BDS statute was struck down in Arizona. Courts struck it down. In fact, courts have repeatedly said you can't, have anti-BDS laws on the books because they are against the First Amendment. So that's one way in which we have a crackdown on the First Amendment. Here's another way. This is reporting from The Intercept here. On the night of August 14th, a small group of around 20 Tucson, Arizona-based activists and community members stood outside the Pima County Adult Detention Complex making noise. They sang, they chanted, they banged drums and pans loud enough to reach the ears of those caged behind the facility's beige concrete walls. Standing on a sidewalk, some lit small handheld fireworks. Others held up a large banner bearing the famed prison abolitionist refrain, "Fire to the prisons." The message to those inside, as with most every noise demonstration held outside a prison, you're not alone. Noise demonstrations are a well-established practice held all around the country for showing solidarity with incarcerated people. They are a gesture of community against the prison system's brutal enforcement of isolation. In Tucson, that August night, according to one attendee, the inmates could be seen dancing and waving in response. The demonstration wound down on its own without any police intervention. The participants rolled up their banner, packed their instruments, and began to disperse. Yet the police were waiting in the wings. A mile away from the facility, along a river path, a dozen sheriffs in patrol cars surrounded and arrested a group they believed had taken part in the protest. The Tucson 12, so named by their supporters, now face the charge of felony riot, a statute that hasn't been used by Arizona prosecutors in years and until Donald Trump's presidency had been rarely invoked anywhere in the country. In the weeks and months following Trump's 2017 inauguration, a wave of repressive anti-protest laws were pushed onto state house agendas nationwide. Republicans in Arizona attempted to pass some of the most heavy-handed legislation. The state Senate Bill 1142, dubbed an anti-rioting bill by its supporters, aimed to dramatically expand the state's existing rioting statutes. The law would have significantly lowered the bar for what counts as participation in a riot, and protesters who were deemed rioters would face hefty racketeering charges. The bill passed the state Senate but died in the House, yet, as the Tucson 12 case demonstrates, the bill wasn't necessary for prosecutors to come down hard on protesters. They're facing 2 years in prison. This is like the J12, J20 or something like that? Protesters on Inauguration Day who many journalists were arrested and then they faced up to 20 years in prison because they say, oh, you participated in a riot, even though they didn't. So this is the new move. The new move is take people who are nonviolent protesters, claim that they're doing a riot, and give them prison time. If you don't recognize this for what it is, you're blind. This is, without a doubt, an attempt to suppress freedom of speech, free expression, free protest. That's what this is. This is an all-out assault, a war on the First Amendment. And guess what? It's mostly coming from the right. Now, I know, it's in vogue nowadays, or at least it was, up until maybe very recently, to just dunk on the left all day and act like the only threat to freedom of speech comes from purple-haired college kids who don't want conservative speakers. Now, I get it. I'm in favor of those speakers being able to speak even if they have odious ideas, because I'm principled on this, and I believe in free speech and free expression. But the people who try to act like that's the only threat to free speech, number one, are wrong. Number two, are doubly wrong because this is an actual threat to the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The purple-haired kids who are trying to stop conservative speakers, I disagree with them, but they're not doing anything that's violating the First Amendment. That's not a violation of the First Amendment because nobody has a right to come speak at a campus. That's not a right. The First Amendment really refers to the government cannot lock you up, cannot, crack down on you for speech and for protesting. That's the actual First Amendment. Now, again, I disagree with the purple-haired college kid because I disagree in principle, because the principle of free speech that they're against. So there's an argument there that they shouldn't do that. But it is not literally unconstitutional, as this move is. Declaring peaceful protests riots, which they're not, and then locking them up, trying to lock them up over it, that's the clearest crackdown on the First Amendment I've ever seen. So no, I support free speech. I support the First Amendment. And I do not think powerful people should try to shut up the people who aren't powerful through this method. This is an authoritarian crackdown, guys. That's what it is. And it's not going to stop. If you think, oh, this will be limited, no, it won't. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And people who are in power and in authority, they want to criminalize dissent because it allows them to do whatever they want to do a lot easier. And that's what we're witnessing here, whether it's the anti-BDS statutes or whether it's this move. And it's mostly coming from the right in terms of like Republican politicians who are going down this path. But it ain't just them. And, Michael Bloomberg, for example, who now is a Democrat, he says, he clearly is an authoritarian and he would, my guess is, be more than willing to entertain these kinds of ideas. So we have to stand against this stuff on principle because we have to really believe in the First Amendment and believe in freedom of speech and free protest. That's really a cornerstone of what it is to be American, and we shouldn't give an inch on that. But it's very telling and very sad that this gets no coverage. I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. Credit to The Intercept for bringing it up. Outside of The Intercept, I haven't heard anybody talk about it. And this is really concerning to me because it's an actual concerted effort to take away our First Amendment and our right to protest. And if you're somebody on the right and you don't agree with them because they're, protesting in favor of prisoners' rights, how are you going to feel if it's a Democrat in office and they're cracking down on your right to protest abortion? Whatever it might be. I don't care. You fill in the blank with whatever issue you care deeply about. What if they tried to round up Tea Party protesters and not allow them to speak their mind? How would you have felt? You would have hated it, right? Well, now you stand in solidarity. You have to stand in solidarity with those you might even disagree with politically because the principle is the thing that matters here. And there's no doubt that this is a crackdown on the First Amendment.